The rain slammed against the sidewalk so hard it sounded like gunfire echoing through downtown Chicago. Daniel Carter pulled his thin gray hoodie tighter around his freezing body while carefully protecting a tiny pink cupcake with both hands. One candle. Just one. Because today, his daughter Emma was turning 13, and even though Daniel had spent the last 6 months sleeping behind the closed grocery store, he still saved enough money to buy her favorite strawberry cupcake. For a brief moment, he smiled. A tired, broken smile. "Maybe this year," he whispered softly. "Maybe she'll hug me again." Rainwater dripped from his beard as he slowly walked toward Lincoln Middle School. Students flooded through the front gates laughing with friends, while expensive cars lined the street nearby. Daniel stopped across the road, searching for her. And then he saw Emma, his little girl. Except she didn't look little anymore. She looked older, colder, tired in a way children should never feel. The second Emma noticed him standing near the gate, she froze. Her entire face turned pale. Fear instantly filled her eyes. Daniel's smile slowly disappeared. Then Emma rushed toward him and whispered something that shattered his heart into pieces. "Dad, please leave before my friends see you." Silence. Pure silence. Daniel's fingers trembled. The pink cupcake slowly slipped from his shaking hands before smashing against a wet sidewalk. Pink frosting scattered across the rain-covered concrete. Neither of them moved. 3 years earlier, Daniel Carter wasn't homeless. He owned Carter Electrical Solutions in Chicago, a respected electrical company. Not wealthy, not famous, but stable, reliable. The kind of business people trusted. Daniel worked 18-hour days fixing electrical systems across the city. Apartment complexes, schools, restaurants, construction sites, factories. By the time he got home every night, his hands were exhausted and covered in grease. But the second Emma ran into his arms, everything felt worth it. She was his entire world. They had traditions. Friday pizza nights on the living room floor, movie marathons with blankets and popcorn, late-night walks through downtown Chicago while Emma held his hand and talked endlessly about school. Sometimes she would point at tall buildings and proudly tell strangers, "My dad helped fix that place." And every single time, Daniel smiled like the richest man alive. To Emma, he wasn't just her father. He was her superhero. But life changed fast. One brutal winter night, Daniel's business partner vanished, along with nearly every dollar inside the company accounts. Loans disappeared, debt exploded, lawsuits followed, bills piled up faster than Daniel could breathe. Within months, everything collapsed. First the business, then the house, then the work vans, then the car. Emma's mother had already passed away years earlier from illness, so there was nobody left to help them. Only Daniel. And he tried. God, he tried. Night jobs, warehouse shifts, construction labor, anything. Everything. But debt collectors destroyed his credit. Employers stopped calling back. Nobody wanted long-term risk. Eventually, they moved into a cheap motel, then homeless shelters, then finally, the streets. And that's when Emma began changing. School became cruel. Kids whispered when she walked past. "Homeless girl. She smells weird. Her dad sleeps outside." Emma slowly stopped smiling, stopped laughing, stopped talking in class. And eventually, she stopped introducing Daniel as her father. Every day, Daniel watched his daughter disappear a little more, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Back in the present, Daniel stood outside Lincoln Middle School soaked by freezing rain. The ruined cupcake rested beside his feet. Emma nervously looked around. 2 girls nearby had already noticed him. "Emma, who's that?" one asked. Panic flooded Emma's face. Nobody at school knew the homeless man outside the gate was her father. She had hidden it for months. Daniel forced a soft smile despite the pain crushing his chest. "It's okay, sweetheart," he said gently. "I was just leaving." But before he could walk away, one of the girls suddenly laughed. "Wait." Her eyes widened. "That's your dad?" Silence felt deadly. Emma lowered her head toward the ground, then quietly whispered, "Yes." The girl started giggling. Daniel looked at Emma's face burning with humiliation, and suddenly, he realized something heartbreaking. His daughter wasn't ashamed because she hated him. She was ashamed because life had broken her too. That night, Daniel sat beneath a bridge, unable to sleep. Rainwater dripped beside him. Cars thundered overhead. Cold wind pushed through the darkness. And for the first time in years, Daniel cried. Not because he was homeless, not because he lost everything, but because his daughter no longer felt safe loving him publicly. Then, suddenly, his old flip phone rang. Unknown number. Daniel almost ignored it, but something told him to answer. "Hello?" he muttered. A serious voice responded instantly. "Mr. Carter? This is Captain Morales from the Chicago Fire Department." A pause. Then, "We need your help." An enormous electrical fire had erupted downtown. An entire apartment building was trapped. Smoke swallowed entire streets. Fire alarms screamed endlessly through the night. People leaned from balconies begging for help. Children cried from balconies. Emergency systems had completely failed, and Captain Morales remembered something important. Years earlier, Daniel Carter had helped design part of the building's emergency wiring system. "You know that structure better than anyone," the captain explained. Daniel stared silently at the ground, then looked down at his torn shoes, his soaked hoodie, his homeless cart beside him. Finally, he asked quietly, "Why would you trust someone like me?" Captain Morales answered without hesitation, "Because good men don't stop being good men after losing money." Daniel froze. For the first time in years, someone still saw value in him. 20 minutes later, Daniel arrived downtown. The scene looked like a battlefield. Flames exploded through upper floors. Smoke covered the skyline. News helicopters circled overhead. Police blocked entire streets. People screamed from balconies while firefighters rushed everywhere. And standing behind the emergency barricades was Emma. Her school had been evacuated nearby. She watched in complete shock as firefighters suddenly pulled her homeless father into the command center. "What's happening?" she whispered nervously. One firefighter stared toward Daniel. "That man," he said quietly, "might save everyone inside." Emma stood speechless. Inside the truck, Daniel quickly studied the emergency blueprints, then pointed toward the basement level. "The backup generator room. If the manual override still works, we can reopen the emergency exits." Captain Morales looked worried. "The basement is already burning." Daniel didn't hesitate even for a second. "I'll go." The entire city watched the disaster unfold live on television. News reporters shouted updates through clouds of smoke. Firefighters sprinted across block streets. Police screamed directions through megaphones. Sirens echoed endlessly through downtown Chicago. And through all the chaos, Daniel Carter disappeared into the burning building. Emma stood behind the emergency barricades, trembling uncontrollably. Rain mixed with tears on her face. "Dad," she whispered weakly. Inside the basement, the heat felt unbearable. Pipes exploded violently above Daniel's head. Electrical sparks rained from the ceiling like fireworks. Smoke swallowed the narrow hallways. Daniel coughed violently while pushing deeper into the darkness, searching for the emergency override panel. Every breath burned his lungs. Every second mattered. Finally, through thick smoke, he found it, the emergency override system. But flames had already reached the wiring. The fire was spreading fast. Daniel stared at the melting cables. He knew immediately. He only had seconds left. Without hesitation, he ripped open the damaged electrical panel using his bare hands. Burning sparks exploded against his skin. Pain shot through his arms. But he didn't stop. Not now. Not while families were still trapped upstairs. Then, with one final effort, Daniel manually reconnected the emergency circuit. And suddenly, throughout the entire apartment building, the emergency exit lights flashed back on. Outside, the crowd erupted. Firefighters instantly rushed trapped families toward reopened stairwells, children crying in their parents' arms, elderly residents struggling down smoke-filled stairs, parents carrying babies wrapped in blankets. One by one, people escaped alive. Emma watched in tears as survivor after survivor emerged safely from the building. Hope spread through the streets. But then, Captain Morales noticed something terrifying. Daniel still hadn't come back out. Captain Morales' face dropped instantly, and before anyone could react, crash. Part of the basement ceiling collapsed inside the building. Emma screamed louder than she ever had in her life. "Dad!" The entire street froze. For several horrifying seconds, nobody moved. Smoke continued pouring from the building entrance. Sirens echoed through the darkness. Then suddenly, through flames and thick smoke, a figure appeared. Daniel, barely standing, covered in ash, carrying a small unconscious boy safely in his arms. The crowd erupted with emotion. People screamed. News reporters shouted into cameras. Firefighters rushed toward him. Some people cried openly in the streets. And Emma ran faster than she ever had in her life, straight towards her father. The second she reached him, she threw herself into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "I'm sorry," she cried. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I was embarrassed and scared and stupid." Daniel winced in pain as he wrapped his burned hands around her. But despite everything, he smiled. A real smile. The kind he hadn't felt in years. Then quietly, almost like a whisper, he told her, "You never needed to be ashamed of me, sweetheart." Emma cried even harder against his chest. "No," she sobbed. "I should have been proud." And in that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the money, not the house, not the streets. Because after years of losing everything, Daniel finally got his daughter back. The story spread across America overnight. Every news station replayed the footage non-stop. Homeless father saves dozens during Chicago fire. Videos of Daniel carrying the little boy through smoke flooded social media. But one moment touched people more than anything else. Emma running into her father's arms. Donations poured in from across the country. Thousands of messages arrived. Support, respect, job offers, hope. 1 week later, Daniel received a call from a major electrical company in Chicago. They offered him a full-time leadership position, not because people pitied him, not because of charity, because they respected him, because the world finally saw what Emma once knew as a little girl. Daniel Carter was a good man. Months later, Lincoln Middle School held a special assembly. Students filled the auditorium seats. Teachers stood along the walls smiling proudly. Emma waited nervously beside the stage. Then the principal stepped towards the microphone. "Today," he announced proudly, "we welcome a local hero." Daniel walked onto the stage wearing a clean electrical work uniform. No torn hoodie, no homeless cart, no rain-soaked streets. Just dignity. The entire auditorium instantly stood up clapping. Students cheered, teachers applauded, and Daniel looked completely overwhelmed by the sound. But nobody smiled harder than Emma, because this time, she wasn't hiding anymore. This time, she stood proudly in front of everyone and shouted, "That's my dad." Daniel turned toward her, and for a moment, his eyes filled with tears. Sometimes people lose money. Sometimes people lose homes, but the strongest people never lose their heart.